Athol Fugard is the most performed playwright, besides Shakespeare, in the world. His 30 or so plays are performed everywhere, in Poland, in Brazil, Australia, in Japan, in the United States, even Iran. The story is very clear. Man's inhumanity to man, totally understandable wherever it is played. And audiences are shocked to have it presented so raw, and shocked to often find themselves in tears.
His contribution has been huge, has been almost incomparable. And in the South African context, of course, the best playwright South Africa has produced. He has been pioneering, and like the greatest of artists, he's still pioneering. He's still trying out new things. He's got incredible energy, new ideas, new images. You know, one just staggers back in front of this fount of creative energy.
It's given to very few playwrights to create a new voice in drama. Beckett does, Penter does, and Fugard does. An absolutely unique voice that is Athol Fugard. Any playwright who speaks in a new voice makes you sit up, and I think that's why the world sat up and listened to Athol Fugard, because he was speaking in a new way.
It is our pleasure, our great pleasure, to present this Lifetime Achievement Award to Tony Award, this Tony Award, to Athol Fugard.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. All of my thinking about this incredible occasion has boiled down to two simple but huge thank yous. Thank you, South Africa. Thank you, America.
There are many periods of our 20th century history that are incomprehensible. And those artists that allow us to empathize with those victims or perpetrators even are doing us and our evolution an enormous service. Otherwise, we'd look away. We wouldn't be able to cope. But Athol is able to say, that's you, with a kind of minimum, well, no flounces, no decorations, no twiddly bits, just the bare bones. So audiences are watching thinking, my God, this isn't about South Africa, that's me. Because he's got to the heart of the experiencing of catastrophic loss, and articulating it in a way that removes that political barrier, and audiences are saying, that's me and that's her. I know exactly what you're going through because I have loved. That's all it's about, really. Not I have lived under apartheid or I have been in a concentration camp. I have loved.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. My name is David. I'm the artistic director here at the Royal Court. And it's an honour to have you all with us here tonight at the Writers' Theatre for this very special celebration of a giant in the world of playwriting, Athol Fugard. Many of Fugard's plays received their UK premieres right here on this stage. The Royal Court was one of the first to recognise the power and urgency of his voice, and it became a second home to Athol's work during the 1970s and beyond. From Sizwe Banzi is Dead, to The Island, to Statements After an Arrest, to Boesman and Lena, these walls have held the weight of his words and witnessed the artistry of the collaborators who brought them to life. That's why we're hosting this event. The Royal Court isn't just a venue, it's part of the story. And it feels right that we, alongside our friends and colleagues from the much, much missed Fugard Theatre in Cape Town, are hosting this celebration of his extraordinary legacy. Tonight, we're going to hear tributes to Athol, see glimpses of his work, and even hear from Athol himself. Today, Fugard's plays remind us that humanity can emerge even in the harshest conditions, of the quiet resistance of love, memory, and friendship, and of theatre's ability to confront injustice while stirring the soul. Tonight, we're privileged to welcome to our stage a man who shared that journey with Athol, his collaborator and his friend, the incomparable John Kani OBE. His presence here makes this evening not just a tribute, but a living memory, a testament to the artistic partnership that helped change the face of theatre in South Africa, in London, and around the world. I'm so glad you're all here to share it with us. Enjoy the evening. Thank you.
I was actually in England at the time, cleaning rooms when my landlord, when I got back to the little bedsitter where my wife and I were living, showed me the front page, I think it was of the Daily Mail or whatever paper it was, Evening Standard maybe. And there on the front page was a famous photograph, I think it was Peter Magubane who took it, of the bodies lying.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I feel somewhat overwhelmed by this occasion and incredibly honoured to be a part of it. My name's Tony Palmer. I directed the films you keep seeing bits of. You'll see a lot more of it later on. Now, sometime in August 2011, I received a phone call from an old friend and distinguished television executive, David Elstein, here present, asking if I could recommend the best documentary film editor around. Dumb question, I said. You're talking to him. You'd expect me to say that, sorry. Anyway, he said, well, in that case, could you come and have lunch with a friend of his to talk about a project? Now, the friend turned out to be Eric Abraham, also here present. He wanted a film to celebrate Athol Fugard's 80th birthday. He had a lot of material, he said, but he felt it needed bashing into shape. I'm quoting him verbatim. It's a great idea of bashing material into shape. So I offered to review all the material, but sadly soon came to the conclusion that, fascinating though some of it was, there really wasn't a film there. Right, he said, go to South Africa. That's Eric is like that. Meet Athol and see what you think might be done. Now, obviously I knew who Athol was, having seen many of his plays both here and on the BBC, when the BBC was the BBC. So I found myself on a plane to Cape Town, and thence whisked by car to Stellenbosch to meet the great man for a 9 a.m. meeting. 9 a.m.? Bit odd, I thought, for an 80-year-old. On my way, my local contact said, "He's a bit grumpy today, be warned." Sure enough, when I met him, he was exceedingly grumpy. I could see him thinking, not another idiot they've sent from up north, believing that they could possibly understand him or what he meant. Then, after about 20 minutes, it was as if the sun had come out. And we talked and talked and talked, and even drank a few bottles of local wine. Eventually, I interviewed him, which you've just seen a short extract, for over 5 days. He just wouldn't stop talking. Nor did I, for that matter. Not just about his struggles with apartheid, of the regime, and later with the ANC, but about art and culture and rugby. And what was the point of it all? It was like being back at university, a voyage of exploration about the meaning and purpose of everything. I can tell you it was exhilarating, exhausting, and made me question my own beliefs as never before. Kept reminding me of something Shostakovich once said to me. Now, Shostakovich, another great artist who'd suffered under appalling difficulties from the political masters. Shostakovich said to me, "To reach the people, that is the question. But how is it done?" Now, I call the finished film, as you've seen, Falls the Shadow. I explained why to Athol himself, and he immediately said that's the most perfect description I could think of. He hadn't seen the film, of course. The film is well over 2 hours, 2.25 hours. Sky eventually grudgingly shown it in the middle of the night, in spite of it having won the gold medal at the New York Film and Television Festival, which Sky had never done before. And then, this year after Athol died, they were offered the film again, for free. They refused, saying, "Oh, well, it's not really of any interest, is it?" Now, I call the film Falls the Shadow, taken from T.S. Eliot's great poem, The Hollow Men. I don't think Athol and Eliot ever met, but sure as hell they sang from the same hymn sheet. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. Between the conception and the creation, between the emotion and the response, falls the shadow. Athol explored those shadows like no other playwright in our time, with devastating, haunting, aching simplicity. Humanity cannot bear much reality, said Eliot, but Athol did, repeatedly, courageously, unflinchingly. Now, some years ago, I was asked to host a memorial occasion for my friend Stanley Kubrick, and I concluded by saying simply, "Thank you, Stanley, for what you gave us." So to Athol, the equal of such great men, I only want to say, thank you, Athol, for what you gave us.
Hey.
Bund.
This is a chance.
Bund.
This is your only chance.
I still say no, Bund. What's it mean, Bund? That means Sizwe Banzi.
He's dead.
I'm not dead, Bund.
Shit, my brother. Let us burn this book. Sizwe Banzi disappears off the face of the earth.
And that man you left in the street, Bund.
Tomorrow the policemen pass that corner. They see the dead man, run his pockets. They won't find this book. 3 days in the public mortuary. Nobody identifies him. Pauper's burial.
And what then, Bund?
I contact my friend Norman at Felton Textiles. I tell him about you, Robert Zwelinzima, my friend. The white man looks at the book. Who does Robert Zwelinzima looks like? You. Who gets the job? You.
And what about that shit at the Labor Bureau,
You don't have to go there. This man has the right stamp in his book and the work seeker's permit. Once the white man signs it, you can stay in Port Elizabeth.
I don't want to lose my name, Bund.
What do you bloody mean you don't want to lose this book? You like this bloody book they gave us when?
I say I can't lose my name, Bund.
Robert Zwelinzima takes this book, he's got a job at Felton Textiles. Sizwe Banzi picks up this one. He walked 150 miles to King Williamstown. You better start walking, you've got to be there yesterday.
Bundu.
Don't bloody bullshit me.
Bundu.
I told you they're coming back again. If they find you here, you'll be back in that crowded train.
Bundu.
You did a bloody lot, man. Go join your wife. She's there in King Williamstown, out of job. Your children are out of school.
Bundu.
Join them. The whole Sizwe Banzi family is on leave for life.
Bundu.
That's what the bloody white man wants.
Bundu.
Sit down with your ass on the Siskan border. Cough your lungs out. That's the way to King Williamstown,
Bundu.
man. Walk.
Bundu.
I said, get out of my house.
Bundu.
What
about my wife, Nowhere to Bund?
What has your wife got to do with this?
Her loving husband is dead, Bund.
So she's going to marry a better man.
Who, Bundu?
Robert Zwelinzima, you, man.
I, Bundu, how can I marry my wife? Who am I, Bundu? Robert or Sizwe? Please, I'm mixed up now,
Leave
Bundu.
the rest to me. As soon as your wife gets here, I will introduce you to your wife.
No, Bund. My children, their father is Sizwe Banzi and they're registered as Banzi at school.
Are you worried about those children? Are you worried about yourself? Are you worried about your bloody name? You, my brother, with this book and that stamp, that job at Felton Textiles, at least can make this world a little bit brighter for your children.
No, I'm afraid, Bund. How do I get used to Robert? How do I live as another man's ghost, Bund?
Ghost? Wasn't Sizwe Banzi a ghost?
No, Bund.
Wasn't he?
No.
When that bloody white man at the labor bureau grabbed you by the collar, what did he see when he looked at your face? A man with dignity and respect, or another dumb book with an NI number. Isn't that a ghost? You, Sizwe Banzi, walks down the bloody main street. The bloody white man shouts again, "Hey boy, come here, John." Isn't that a ghost? All I want you to be is a real ghost. That's what they've turned us into.
It's not Jim. We're kind of the last of the Mohicans here. Seems to me, John and I were just sitting together and saying, everyone's dead. It's a terrible thing. But here we are, and we worked. I didn't work with Athol, I worked on his plays. But John is the one who's worked with Athol. Can you travel back, John, to when you were that young thing that they've just seen? When you first met him in Port Elizabeth, you were in a factory. Tell us about that.
Whew, I haven't seen that for a long time.
No.
In 1960, Sharpeville happened. A group of black women, children, and men went to the police station to protest against the past laws which controlled the movement of black people around the country. In 1960, the 5-year treason trial of all the ANC, black and white, was dismissed by Judge Munich as no substance in it. In 1964, the Rivonia trial took place, and Nelson Mandela and all the senior members of the ANC were sentenced to life on Robben Island. The ANC began recruiting young people to go and be trained outside the country. I was so excited. I was going to go to Zambia, I was going to Tanzania, I was going to learn how to use the AK-47, and we're going to do practicals in Vietnam against the Americans, and we're going to go to China, where we're going to be taught how to put together Molotov bombs and to know how to throw a grenade, and we were all going to come back and kill all of the white people. I knew that. And I believed in that. I was supposed to go and study law at Forte University. My father came back and he said, "I'm sorry, I don't have the money. My uncle has just been sentenced to 5 years on Robben Island." I then enlisted, and the transport didn't come that day, so I missed leaving the country. Fats Boholane, who's a friend, said to me, "There's a group of actors called the Serpent Players. They're doing a play. It's a Greek play. It's about English people. Can you come? We need a few people on stage." We arrived at this place which was just been declared white. Kempton Road used to be colored. Through group areas, the whole area was rezoned as white. But Athol managed to find a way to rehearse in one of these rooms before they were mowed down. I walked in, and there was a white man with a brown jersey smoking a pipe. I thought he was a caretaker. I walked into this group of actors, and I realized these were brothers who were members of the underground structures, which I was part of. So I thought, my God, I respected these old guys, Norman, Mulligan, Welcome, George. I knew the brothers. They were people who were involved in the struggle. And then just before that white man I met came in, and Fats Boholane said to me, "Oh, Athol, let me introduce you. Athol, this is John. John, this is Athol." That was the first time in my life I was introduced to a white person on the first name basis. It's normally, "John, this is Mr. Fugard. Mr. Fugard, this is John." And that moment created a bond, a friendship, against all my hate, my anger, my bitterness, and even my struggle to leave. And I sat there and listened to Athol explaining Antigone by some guy couldn't pronounce the surname properly, Sophocles or whatever his name was. And the question was to us sitting down, if the law is unjust, do the people have the right to protest and fight to change that law? I grew up under apartheid. I'm 82 years old. And all I knew is I'm not allowed to do this, I'm not allowed to do this. You're black all the time. And suddenly it resonated with that feeling that I wanted to leave the country to fight for a free, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South Africa. That line that Athol said I could stay a little longer. And that was in 1965. And now I'm here 60 years later, and I'm saying to Athol, I could stay a little longer.
Sometimes there were parties. And I met this man at one of them. I don't know, we didn't drink much, but there was a lot of fluid lying around and a lot of conversation. And I was in Port Elizabeth, and I was introduced to somebody called John Kani. And we had immediately an incendiary conversation about something. Mainly about language. He started shouting at me, he said, "You didn't even learn my language, Xhosa." And I said, "Well, I'm the loser." I was so cross, because I was. And from then started a relationship that culminated many, many, many years later in us working together on Shakespeare. But in between, I have stayed glued to South Africa because it's where you feel most. Everything's on the surface, somehow nothing hidden, nothing euthanized. And I want you to tell us now your experience, please, John, of what it's like to work with Athol, but on the floor, in a room.
You know, my younger brother, who was shot by the police in 1985, which Nothing But the Truth was a tribute to him, said, "What are you doing? You're working with white people. What's going to happen when the revolution comes? You're not going to give me a list of white people I can't kill because they are your friends?" I said, "There'll be a couple I'll give you." It will be Athol Fugard. It will be Barney Simon. It will be Helen Suzman. It will be many, many. They said, "I'm not listening." He said, "You don't understand. We can't do this if we are going to be moderates." The first play we did together was Antigone. And Athol kept talking about honesty, integrity, the truth, trust, hope. He called these very dangerous words. And he sat there with a pipe and with a little glass. Oh, I miss the days when he was drinking. He was mean. He was pushing. He was always gnawing at your soul. He wanted to go beyond your anger. And somehow, I don't understand that he knew that I was very angry. And one day we were working on a scene and Athol said, "Look, you're not listening. Think much deeper than your anger. Look at the word, look at the character, look at the story. That's where your power, that's where your word, your honesty is." And I'm thinking, he's white. What the hell is he talking about? He can't shackle out of him his white privilege of assuming that he knows more than me. And he looked at me and he said, "You know, John, I don't know how to make a bomb. So if you think I'm going to teach you that, you can walk." Even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you how. Because you will, as you put the fuse down, you'll blow yourself up. I walked out and I went home.
And then what?
We were going to do the coat, which was the journey of a coat of an elderly man who was sentenced to 15 years on Robben Island, gave it to one of the serpent players to take to the wife and tell the wife, who was 69, that your husband got 15 years. So we followed that history of that coat. And then Athol said, "Yes, we've done Antigone, we've done Euripides, yes, we've done the Bacchae, we've done all these things, but what about the stories that matter to us?" And that was the first experiment, using that coat and what would happen to it.
But you were using Antigone more centrally in the island. Huh?
Because when I joined the cast of Antigone, Shark, who was another brother who was a teacher, never knew his lines. Never knew his lines. So Athol then made me the prompt, the box office, the marketing, the security, and at the end stand behind Shark. He played Haemon in Antigone. So he would not pick up one word. You got to give him the entire sentence. So I knew the role completely because I was giving him the lines all the time. Then Shark disappeared, didn't come to rehearsals. We found out that Shark has been arrested. South African apartheid government would not try you in London. Your trial will not be in London. It will be in some small town near Cardiff. Some small place so that the family cannot organize defense. So all we knew, Shark didn't come, but Shark is on Robben Island, serving 7 years. My uncle, who was also on Robben Island, sent me a letter with windows. They cut up the verbs. when they send you the letter, they take out the verbs. So you got to work it out what my uncle is telling me. So we found out that Shark was doing a one-man performance of Antigone on Robben Island during their lunch. And we laughed, all of us. I said, he never knew the lines. So when we were working on the island, we had been invited, a young man, I don't know whether he's still young now, Nicholas Wright. He was working in this theater, came to see the island, Sizwe Banzi at the Space Theater. And then we got the invitation. Well, I knew that Athol didn't have a passport because it's been confiscated, so he reapplied. And after 6 weeks, Athol got the passport. Winston applied, and after 8 weeks, Winston got the passport. I never got the passport because my family was known to be activists. So I knew I wasn't going to get it, but we didn't tell the royal court. We made them do all the work until it was kind of like 3 weeks before we go. Now we say, John has a problem with a passport. So we went to Helen Suzman and says, Helen, I have a problem with the passport. She says, when are you traveling? I said, in another, Helen's related to Janet. Then Helen said to me, she says, John, I've got to take de Klerk to tea, and I hate him. He's the only one who will get you the passport. So I went to Pretoria. I was given the document, passport, but I realized it was brown. It's not green and gold. And I opened it. It said, nationality undetermined. Citizenship blank. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to travel with this document? I arrived at Heathrow and I was looking, oh, that one is Pakistani, I don't want to go there. Oh, that one is English, I'm not going there. I was looking for a lady, because I've got to introduce a document no one's ever seen. And finally I said to the guy, now you go. He said, oh, thank you. I said, no, because I know where you're going. I want to go to that lady. I went there and he looked at it. He said, you from South Africa? I said, yes. What the hell would they think of next? So when we created the island, it was based on the fact that Shark was performing Antigone on Robben Island. Later I found out that Mandela was also about to do a performance of Antigone, but he was going to play it crayon. He told me that. So what we did then, Athol said, I'm not allowed to look at the book of Antigone. I must remember when trying to convince that we're going to do this play called The Trial of Antigone with Winston. And Winston's difficulty was simply not knowing about Antigone. He didn't care about it because he was Pan-Africanist and he felt that we in the ANC are too soft. And that was me. And Athol, of course, was, what is the word of Athol? He was just a South African who cared, who was human, and who did not like anything that was discriminating. So we managed to do the island. We finally got it together, and then we performed it for maids in the garage and domestic servants, and they walked out. And they said, you are playing with what happened to our husband and our children, and you making a play about it. How dare you? We thought, oh my God. But we then opened in this theater, 1974.
And then you went to New York.
Oh, yes.
But I remember Athol saying, when you won the Tony, Athol, I remember saying, I don't want them to get famous. Because it's going to ruin everything. It'll ruin their acting, which it always does. And they became famous, but he said, it will protect them. True?
True.
Yes, your fame protected you.
When
we did Othello, I just got to stop now. A lot of people said to me, how could you get away with doing Othello? Story of a black man who marries a white girl who's humiliated by a white thug, blah, blah, in Johannesburg, and it wasn't stopped. Because there isn't a single Calvinist policeman who could walk in and ban Shakespeare without feeling that. Right?
Right.
So Shakespeare's fame protected us too.
I got on the way to the theater to do Othello, I got detained.
Yes.
Taken to John Foster by the police. And the first question was, who wrote this play? Shakespeare. And you people didn't fuck it up too much. No, sir, it's exactly as it's written. All right, now listen. Page 3. That guy with the big head, the Duke, says to you that go get your wife, you say the wife must come. Ne? Then you tell that cock story about how you used to be taken by tribes and all that. Now when she comes in, you take her in your hands and you kiss her on the lips. Show me here in the script, where does it say they kiss? Here, page 13, just before she goes, you tell that other tall guy, Iago, to look after her. But as before she goes, in front of her father, Nochal, you kiss her on her lips. I said, no, she kissed me. And then he says, now another, I'm thinking, Jesus, Janet, the policeman read the play.
Well,
and of course,
I couldn't find a copy of it in the university library. It was a banned book. There was Japanese versions, comic strip versions of Othello. Not the real thing.
well, the other plays, as Athol went on, Master Harold and the Boys, My Children, My Africa, Playland, back to Blood Knot, back to every play that Athol had written except Hello and Goodbye. I wasn't the right color. Worked with this incredible man who really was a teacher, a mentor.
When he was directing you, it's sometimes difficult to have the writer directing plays, isn't it? But it wasn't, I take it.
Oh, Athol, immediately when the script is on the table and we come in as actors, he always told us that the writer is not available. And I would say, I know him, I could talk to him later. And Athol wanted much, much more. If you read and you go through the process of unpacking the text, investigating it, interrogating content, Athol wanted deeper and deeper. And I still remember we're doing Blood Knot with, what is his actor's name? Marcel van Heerden. Athol pushed so far, I got nervous. Because it began to shake the whiteness of Marcel. He began to say, but by the way, you are colored. And there was one thing that disempowered the white South African is not to recognize their white privilegedness. And he walked to the car park. He said, I can't take it anymore. I don't care. When Athol did Lesson from Alos, his actor placed in Paulus, walked out on the 3 days before the opening night. And Athol stepped in and played the role.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because he was so angry, because Athol was digging and digging questions about identity of the colored community, the identity of white and black, and he was so angry, and he said, you don't know colored people. How dare you tell me about colored people? And Athol said, sit down, read the play. And then he walked out. That was Athol. Then he stopped drinking and started drinking Perrier water. I just felt I missed that incredible, intense person who forced you to go to areas within your soul that were sacred, pushing you to a point of even doubting your own self, to work with plays that were against the establishment. You almost think, why? What is it doing is white? Athol never exploited or used the privilege of being white privilege in South Africa. He was a constant investigator.
But he and Barney Simon were brothers in that, weren't they? There was a pair there, quite an extraordinary collision of two souls running the Market Theatre for its extraordinary 20, 30-year history, right? We were just talking about it now. It started in 1976. And Barney Simon was a soul brother to Athol. They saw the world through the same lenses. Yeah.
We were doing the death of Bessie Smith, and Janet was playing the nurse. And Janet got so freaking angry at Barney giving Janet, you understand. That's the note. Janet, you understand. And Janet said, Barney, say it. And I loved the moment when you stopped off the rehearsal and Barney said, Janet, feel like. He was naughty. And Janet said, I can't take this anymore. Wow, he was so angry. But that was the different ilk of directors who were in constant pursuit of the truth and perfection. Athol always made it clear in your journey that you will never get to the point where I'm saying brilliant.
Yeah.
But please, in the process of this work, continue pursuing and hoping that you'll get to a point where I would say good.
I remember, all the reviews I had been reading to catch up with Athol's work about today. One simple thing just stands out. It was a critic called Frank Marcus who ended his review of something saying, as for Athol Fugard, I don't just admire him, I believe him. And that kind of, you cannot not believe what Athol writes on the page. It has a kind of fleshly truth to it, doesn't it? Which no actor wants to escape. I don't think white actors as well, basically, want to do that.
We went to him because I was fired at my job at Ford assembling engines. I'm a mechanical engineer. I can fix your car. But not the latest one, because I don't know where the engine in the latest one is. Maybe it could even be Elon Musk. It's at the back of batteries. And Winston resigned from his job, and so we went to Athol. And said, we want to be professional. So I said, what? Oh, we want to do theater now. We've given up our jobs. I said, it's the most stupid decisions you've ever made. And Yvonne Bryceland was in the meeting because we were talking, and she said, I can't get work and I'm white. There are no theaters in South Africa that will employ you. They're all for white people. So how in 1972 you say you want to be actors? Stop it. Eric Atwell says they need to be taken to a counselor. They can't do this. You're right the way, keep your job. And then we went back to Athol. We said, we're not going to do Blood North or whatever two-hander that you have. We want to work on it with you. For 2 weeks, he didn't answer. And then he said, all right, come. Let's start working. What do you have? We had an unpublished script by Wole Soyinka called The Detainee. It was only 6 pages, so we had to make it up. And then Winston came with told us a story because he would bullshit when he hasn't done homework. Athol's strength was the rehearsal is not where you show what I am teaching you. You showcase what you've been doing in homework so that we could move forward than yesterday. So you have to show that I've been working on this. And we talked about this guy who takes a photograph of himself in front of the camera with a pipe and a cigarette lit, smiling. And Athol said, I know those Bantu photographic studios where you get the photograph or a passbook, or if you have a passport, we didn't know what a passport would take you to. And then we laughed at this because, come on, he's stupid. The following day, we then go back to Wole Soyinka, and Athol says, tell me about that photograph. I said, what? Why would he do that? And said, Athol, we just told the wives, we are professional. We need to make money as soon as possible. He said, now tell me about that photograph. He said, well, it's a photograph of a man who walks into a Bantu photographic studio, take a picture of himself with a telephone, and that's all, send it to his girlfriend or wife. He said, tell me more. And so we got a bit fed up now because Athol was drinking Tassenberg and is now creating problems. And finally, because my father worked at the pass office. So he finally said, he got his passbook in order. And then Athol said, okay, go back. Let's now talk. Why is the passport not in order? And that was that process of working through experiment in playmaking, which was a forerunner of what became hackneyed as workshopping a play. But the method of Athol was different. It was, if I said, well, the man comes to take a photograph, he said, John, stand up, Winston, stand up, which one you want to be? I said, I'll be the photographer, I'll be the guy coming to take the photograph. And in the meantime, at the end of that improv, we have to go home and write down everything that happened, so that tomorrow we take it from there. And that process took 21 days of unbelievable 14 days an hour. And finally we had something that we were going to show. But what we did not have, it was about 50 minutes. So we didn't know how, then we can't take a play that's 50 minutes, surely. And I was sitting down and was reading a newspaper, being at Ford, and I read 1.5 million rand car expansion. And I laughed, I said, bullshit, I know exactly what they mean. Because I worked for 6 years at Ford Motor Company, and Mr. Henry Ford did come and visit. Oh, did we get smart swashed and new overalls, look like everything I described in Sizwe Banzi is dead. And then I'm just making a joke about making Winston and Athol laugh. But finally, Mr. Ford arrives, takes one look at us and look at this thing and walks out. We spent 2 days scrubbing the floors, cleaning, getting new overalls. So I thought, can we go back to the work? He said, take a newspaper, do that again. But he had today's newspaper. Said, he's starting again. He's starting again. I just want lines to learn. I don't want lines to make. And that was the kind of gift he had, was to stimulate you as an actor. When I became a writer, starting to write an individual, I asked him, how do you start a play? He said, well, what do you want to write about? I said, I don't know, but I just want to write a play. He said, don't put the title down. I said, yes. He said, don't put the title down because you were bound to that stupid title. I said, okay, what do I do? He said, put the white paper on your desk and hold your pen and move back. But don't tell the paper you're coming. And don't go to that paper until you've got something to say. And when you sit down, sit one and start writing. The paper will realize, oh my God, it's writing, let me be ready. And that's the principle I've used in all the plays I've written.
More we don't need to know about. That was fantastic. Thank you, John.
And then my mother, an Afrikaner, as richly, deeply rooted in the South African soil as any of our many other South African identities. This simple woman from the Karoo was endowed with a natural sense of justice. And it was that sense of justice that led her eventually to look at the world around her and see what was happening to people in the world around her, particularly people of color, the coloreds and the Africans, and to realize, it led her to realize that there was something seriously wrong with the country, radically wrong. She passed those doubts and questions on to me when I was still a young boy. If I have to look back and find the moment when I first started questioning the validity of the society in which I was living, it goes back to those times when we sat together in the St. George's Park tea room and talked about the country, talked about our feelings. But there were, of course, other prejudice, other forces at work on that little boy. I mean, we weren't cocooned, we weren't sort of isolated from the rest of society. And that society, using all the many forces at its disposal, was also trying to influence me, trying to
load me with the prejudices and the bigotries that characterized South Africa in pre-colonial times, and then, of course, most notoriously through the apartheid years. The end result was a very confused and conflicted young boy who was heading for his own personal defining moment. I waited for 30 years before I was able to tell the story of that moment, and I did so in my play, Master Harold and the Boys. It records how, in a moment of intense and agonizing loneliness and confusion, a time of divided loyalties, I spat in the face of the most beautiful friend I have ever had. And I could do that because he was black, you see, and I was white, so I could do it. In writing this play, Master Harold and the Boys, I tried very hard to portray as accurately as I could the remarkable spirit of those two men. Sam, in particular, his passion was ballroom dancing, and his passion for it, I discovered, was based on a vision of a better world than we found ourselves in. He tried to explain it to me as we sat in the empty tea room on one very wet Port Elizabeth afternoon.
Hello, my name's Matthew Zia. I'm a theatre director and I've had the honour of working on a number of Athol Fugard's plays. It's a true honour to be here tonight as we gather to celebrate the life and work of Athol Fugard at the Royal Court, where his plays were first staged in the UK. I first encountered Athol's writing back in 2012, a bit of a late start, I know, when I won the Genesis Future Directors Award at the Young Vic. My initial proposal was for Master Harold and the Boys, a play I felt captured a personal, pivotal moment for Athol, one that I believe set him on a path towards using his voice for social justice. However, I ended up directing Sizwe Banzi is Dead instead. It played at David Land's Young Vic in 2013, and then with Eclipse Theatre, we took the production on a UK tour the following year. Sizwe was my first real experience of Athol's work. It was transformative. I became obsessed, not just with his plays, but with the man himself, the power of his words, his intent, and his spirit. I read his notebooks, his diaries, I devoured interviews and the extraordinary documentary by Tony Palmer, Falls the Shadow. All of it gave me a deeper understanding of who Athol was, a man driven by a resolute sense of justice, unafraid to risk his own liberty to confront the brutal system he lived under. When I first read Sizwe Banzi is Dead, I'll be honest, John, the form confused me. We spent 45 minutes with a photographer named Styles, who, it appears at first, has nothing to do with the titular character, only to then have this narrative interrupted by a man called Robert Zwelinzema, still no Sizwe. Through flashback and a letter to his wife, we discover that to exist and to provide for his family, Sizwe Banzi has died. He's sacrificed his name, and with that, his connection to ancestry and heritage. He will survive by living as a dead man, Robert Zwelinzema, whose passbook he will fraudulently use. Sizwe mixes humour, rage, playfulness, and vulnerability in a way that only Athol with John and Winston could. It exposed the cruelty of apartheid's past laws, but more importantly, it celebrated the resilience and creativity of South Africans fighting for their humanity. Working on Sizwe taught me something fundamental about the power of theatre, that storytelling can be a survival strategy, that theatre shouldn't just be observed, it has to be useful. In 2019, I was invited to direct Blood Knot at the Orange Tree Theatre. Blood Knot is a quieter, more introspective, full of emotional depth and a shocking act of violence. Two brothers in a room trying to navigate their own existence and imagine something better. The relationship between Morris and Zach is loaded with shame, resentment, and envy, but also tenderness and love, shaped by the brutal realities of the world they inhabit. Blood Knot meant something deeply personal to me as a mixed-race man. With one black parent and one white, I've often had to navigate the complexities of how those parts of me are perceived by the world versus the way I understand them myself. Morris, with his light skin, has a choice in how he engages with his identity. Zachariah, darker skinned, doesn't. While preparing for Blood Knot, I found a note Athol had written in the early 1960s, published in his notebooks, shortly before writing the play. He was living in a flat in Port Elizabeth at the time, his father dying in one room, his wife Sheila pregnant in the other. Amid all of this, Athol was writing, channeling grief, fear, hope, and new beginnings. One line stayed with me. He wrote, "People must be loved," and that real love, the kind that breaks through our isolation and allows us to feel another's suffering, is a crucifying experience. That's what Blood Knot is about for me. It's about what it means to keep loving, even when everything around you tells you to shut off, to stop caring, to disconnect. Athol's plays are much more than political agitprop. They're deeply human, compassionate, and complex. They force us to look at the contradictions within ourselves and the systems we enable. He didn't write about heroes or villains. He wrote about people, real people, trying to make sense of the world around them. I never met Athol Fugard, but I have a deep and enduring relationship with his work. I'm incredibly grateful to have worked with his words and now to carry them in my heart. Thank you, Athol Fugard. Now, performing the Kite monologue from Master Harold, as he did at the Fugard Theatre in 2020, Kai Luke Brummer. Thank you.
You know what my best memory is, don't you? It started off looking like another one of those useless, nothing-to-do afternoons. I'd already been down to Main Street looking for adventure, but nothing had happened. I didn't feel like climbing trees in Donkin Park or pretending I was a private eye and following a stranger. So, as usual, see what's cooking in Sam's room? This time, it was you on the floor. You had 2 thin pieces of wood and you were smoothing it down with a knife. It didn't look particularly interesting. But when I asked you what you were doing, you just said, "Wait and see, Hallie. Wait and see." In that secret sort of way of yours. So I knew there was a surprise coming. You teased me, you bugger, by being deliberately slow and not answering any of my questions and whistling while you worked. God, it was infuriating. I could have brained you. It was only when you tied them together into a cross and put that down on brown paper that I realized what you're doing. Sam's making a kite. And when I asked you and you said, "Yes," the sheer audacity of it took my breath away. I mean, what the hell does a black man know about flying a kite? I'll be honest with you, Sam, I had no hopes for it. If you think I was excited and happy you got another guest coming. In fact, I was shit scared we were going to make fools of ourselves. When we left the boarding house to go up onto the hill, I was praying quietly that there wouldn't be any other kids around to laugh at us. Do you remember what the poor thing looked like? Tomato boxwood and brown paper, flour and water for glue. 2 of my mother's old stockings for a tail, and then all those bits and pieces of string you made me tie together so that we could fly it. Hell no, that was only asking for a miracle to happen. Then you told me to hold the string and run with it when you let go. I was prepared to run all right, but straight back to the boarding house. You went a little distance from me down the hill. You held it up, ready to let it go. This is it, I thought. Like everything else in my life, here comes another fiasco. Then you shouted, "Go, Hallie!" And I started to run. I don't know how to describe it, Sam. Yeah, the miracle happened. I was running, waiting for it to crash into the ground, but instead, suddenly, there was something alive behind me at the end of the string, tugging as if it wanted to be free. I looked back. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was flying, looping around and trying to climb even higher into the sky. You shouted to me to let it have more string. I did until there was none left and I was just holding that piece of wood we had tied to it. You came up and joined me. You were laughing. I was so proud of us. It was the most splendid thing I'd ever seen. I wish there were hundreds of kids around to watch us. The part that scared me, though, was when you showed me how to make it dive down towards the ground, and then just when it was at the point of crashing, swoop up again. I didn't want to try it myself. No, I would have been suicidal if something had happened to it. Watching you do it made me nervous enough. I was quite happy just to see it up there with its tail fluttering behind it. You left me after that, didn't you? You explained how to get it down. We tied it to the bench so that I could sit and watch it, and then you went away. I wanted you to stay, you know. I was a little scared of having to look after it by myself. Sort of sad bringing it down, Sam, and it looked sad again when it was lying there on the ground, like something that had lost its soul. Just tomato box wood, brown paper, and 2 of my mother's old stockings. But hell, I'll never forget that first moment when I saw it up there. I had a stiff neck the next day from looking up so much. Why did you make that kite, Sam?
Hello, my name's Barney Norris. I'm here in the first instance because when I was 18 years old, I was growing up in Salisbury and I saw Master Harold and the Boys. And I'd never known theatre could be good. And I'd never known theatre could be about something. And that set me off on a journey which meant much later I got the opportunity to spend some time with Athol. I feel that Athol saved my life in the autumn of 2022 when I visited Stellenbosch to spend time with him, his wife Paula, and their daughter Hallie. We were supposed to be working on a book together, and we did, but our time became so much more than that. There were lunches in the house or the restaurant round the corner, walks in the woods, a braai that went on well past midnight. Over coffee in the mornings, I'd sit with Athol and we'd use the Roberts Bird app on his phone to identify the calls of all the birds in the garden. Then he might tell me a story from his life. The awe he felt rehearsing Antigone when he asked Yvonne Bryceland to smash a chair to bits, and she proceeded to do so for a full half an hour until he said she couldn't make the shards any smaller. The journey he made by sea at 18 from Cairo to Japan, having hitchhiked from Port Elizabeth to Cairo, when an illiterate Somalian sailor used to watch him every night as he wrote a novel by hand sitting on a deck hatch, and the way that sailor never spoke to him again when he finished the novel, decided it was terrible, and threw it in the sea. Just once, he told me the story of a play he was planning. He spoke elegantly, carefully, slightly formally. I hardly dared breathe for fear he'd stop. He told me about a nurse overseeing the death of their last patient, who then walks out into their own town, Athol's old town, wearing a hat, which seemed to be crucial, and saw that everything they knew had gone. It's a play that will remain unwritten. Athol and I had shared certain extreme experiences, albeit more than half a century apart, which had been formative for both of us. And I think as a result, we bonded quite strongly. Over the course of my time with him, we both cried together, taking one another's hands, and all the time he treated me like I was his equal. To receive that from someone whose life had been so vast radically altered my perspective. The project we were working on together was, in part, an examination of Athol's flaws. He and Paula were relentlessly clear-eyed and analytical in all they did, but they were also two extremely romantic people, to the point where they decided to have a child together. Athol remained a dreamer, full of plans to the end. His most striking quality, though, was his endless gratitude. He felt very lucky to have lived an extraordinary life. I think that life contains an urgent lesson for us. His work is a model for how to resist a regime one detests while remaining committed to the country one loves. A pressing question for a great many people today. In his final public appearance, speaking to an online audience convened by the Society of Authors last year, he shared what I thought might be the key tenet of that project when he said, "Anger is a withering emotion. It is better to write out of love." When I came to the end of my time with Athol, he gave me a very precious gift. This is Athol's copy of the notebooks that he kept between 1960 and 1977, which Matthew's told you about. Nicking one of my lines, actually. And in the front, he's written, "To our future," which I've thought about quite a lot since he died, because Athol was an optimistic man, but he was 91 when he wrote those words. And I think it may have crossed his mind that some of our shared future might be posthumous for him. And so I have been thinking about exactly what that future should look like, how I can keep his story going now that I can't call him up and ask him. I wanted to invite you all to do the same thing, actually. We all share this evening, which is an act of commemoration, but that doesn't have to mean it's an end. I'd invite you to ask yourselves, how can the life of Athol Fugard and the way that he's mattered to you, which is why you've come here tonight, be just a beginning? What are the lessons that he left us which you'd like to take forward into the future? As I say, Matthew nicked my line, but I'm going to read it again because it's a good one. And I, leafing through the book, looking for what I want that future to look like, came across this very beautiful sentence he wrote at the end of 1961, which feels to me like a vision for living. As he told us earlier, people must be loved. That is the really crucifying experience of the short time we have as human beings, that intimacy which breaks through our defensive isolation and shows the capacity, if need be no more than that, just an awareness of the potential of someone else's suffering. Thank you.
There was no one else that I could think of that deserved a theatre to be named after them. Who else? Who else is a giant of South African theatre but Athol? Whose work spoke about common humanity in such a consistent way, who had a fundamental integrity, morality, and capacity to reach people from all over the world and all the linguistic groups and ethnicities with the stories that he was telling, which was essentially about our humanity. And he was very modest in that he didn't initially want it to be called the Fugard.
I'm not a publicity-seeking animal. I just felt uncomfortable. I felt I would lose a certain necessary privacy because that was very important to me in working, in writing. You know, I wanted to be a private individual. Looking back on it now, no regrets, absolutely none. Because, oh God, it was so wonderful finally to be in a situation that allowed me to function as a professional, not as somebody just sort of hiding away in corners and making theatre. I would never forget how heartwarming it was for me when I arrived at the theatre, parked my car. I was always given, before I'd even got into the theatre, on the pavement outside the theatre, such an incredibly warm welcome, you know, and it just sort of augured that this is the South Africa we want, this sort of feeling between black and white and the stupidities of apartheid. Apartheid. Dirty word. Eric created something which he didn't even himself recognize the significance of in the beginning, because it was an act of defiance. It was such a courageous move on Eric's part. And yeah, in the Hall of Fame, there's got to be one special acknowledgement of that.
Evening, everybody. I'm Greg Karvellas. I worked at the Fugard for just under 10 years, and I was the artistic director for 2 years just before it closed. Very lucky to be there. I've had the privilege of putting the celebration together. It's been an enormous honor, and I've been asked to say a few words on behalf of everybody that was part of the Fugard Theatre. The Fugard Theatre, named after Athol Fugard, opened in 2010 and closed in 2020. And we spent an incredible 10 years creating theatre in the honor of Athol and all that his writing stood for. On the screen is one of the many memorable moments from those years. In this photo, Athol meets Dr. Frankenfurter. The Rocky Horror Show was playing in our main auditorium, complete with fishnets and time warps, while Athol was next door in his beloved Fugard Studio Theatre performing The Shadow of the Hummingbird, his quiet, deeply personal reflection on life, aging, and memory. It was a surreal and joyful moment, two wildly different worlds meeting in the same building on the same night, and yet somehow it made perfect sense. Because if the Fugard was about anything, it was about holding space for both, the bold and the tender, the flamboyant and the reflective, and a fitting connection too, since the Rocky Horror debuted here at the Royal Court, and Athol presented his work here as well over 50 years ago. In many ways, the photo captures what the Fugard stood for telling stories that cross boundaries, that speak to joy and pain, fear, freedom, stories that no matter where they begin, always return to our shared humanity. To all of us at the Fugard, Athol was, and borrowing from his words from Master Harold and the Boys, our man of magnitude, not just because his name was on the theatre or because of the weight of his international reputation, but because of the way he carried that magnitude, with humility, with moral conviction, and with a profound sense of responsibility to those without a voice. As we've heard tonight, Athol wrote for the hurting, for the forgotten, for the exiled within their own country. He gave voice to the people apartheid tried to erase, and in doing so offered them dignity, visibility, and a mirror to the rest of us. His work was never just political, it was human. It asked us to look harder, to feel deeper, and to act better. He reminded us that we only get by if we help each other, that treating one another with empathy isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. He taught us to step outside our own experience, to imagine the lives of others, and above all, to be kind. The Fugard Theatre, like the man it was named for, was open to all. You felt at the moment you walked through the doors, it didn't matter who you were, what you earned, where you came from, you were welcome. His moral clarity was our compass. His voice, on and off the page, steered us. And yet, in the foyer of his theatre, Athol would quietly fold himself into a corner, head tilted, wool cap pulled low, but his eyes twinkling, but wary of the fuss, sharing a glass of red wine and speaking to anyone who approached him. He didn't like the spotlight, but he always had a warm, kind, and welcoming word for anyone he spoke to or encountered. And now that gentle voice echoes in our minds, reminding us who we are and who we must continue to be. Athol is now facing east, looking towards his own Mecca, his journey complete, and behind him stretches a road of 1,000,000 words, words that have challenged, comforted, and forever changed us. We who were the Fugard, actors, audiences, ushers, stage managers, producers, technicians, storytellers, salute our hero and our friend. I just need to do some thanks because none of this could have been possible with a lot of people working really, really hard and really jumping in. And it's really what has made this so special for me, and I hope for all of you. I want to thank Eric Abram and the Common Humanity Arts Trust for making this possible. David and the Royal Court Theatre team, you guys are just absolutely incredible, and thank you for welcoming us. And a big shout out to Natalie, who really, really, I would not have been able to do this without her. Thank you for hosting us. Tony Palmer, who spoke so beautifully earlier, thank you so much for letting us use parts of your special documentary. It's really beautiful. I'm sure you've all seen it. Go and watch it again. It's an exquisite piece of documentary making, so thank you so much for that. To Gavin Furlonger, who's here with us from F Gallery in Cape Town, for providing these incredible photographs, which were taken by Paul Elberts in the 70s at the Space Theatre. And he's got the original prints and very kindly allowed us to reproduce them like this so we could have Athol of the 70s with us. So thank you for that, Gavin. To Paula Faree, Athol's wife, who couldn't be with us tonight, but generously gave us permission to use her essay, Trying to Rejoin the Sun, which I hope everybody's got a copy of. Please give it a read. It's really beautiful. To all the suppliers that have gone above and beyond and helped us with every small request, going really above and beyond, thank you so much. Thank you to our speakers tonight for making the time, for sharing your stories and your experiences with Athol. It's really special. We've captured all of this on film, so it's there forever, which is great. And finally, thank you to all of you for coming. I'm going to be really honest and go, I wasn't sure. I was a bit nervous. I was like, oh, what if nobody comes? But you're all here, and there's a real sense of love and commemoration and just thinking back on the special person Athol was, and who has forever changed and will continue to change people's lives and theatre. So thank you all for coming.
One of the worst questions that journalists, and they consistently ask it of me, what do you want the audience to take away from this play? How can I ever tell you what goes on in another human heart? You know, what do they make of that story? It's put out there in an act of faith.
We're white man's rubbish. He throws it away, we pick it up, wear it, hey, sleep in it, eat it. We're made of it now. Hey, it's rubbish, it's people.
Throw yourself away and leave us alone.
Hey, why do you think we sit here like this? We've been thrown away. Rubbish is him. Him too. Hey, they don't want him anymore. Useless. Hey, but there, hey, see what happens. Hey, Lena picks him up, wraps him in a blanket, gives him food.
You picked up yours. I picked up mine.
Hey, I got it for nothing. I made a pond dog. What you gonna do with him?
That's not a pond dog. It's a coffin. You bury my life in your pond dogs, all of them. Not tonight. Crawl into darkness and silence before I'm dead? No, I'm on this earth, not in it. Look now. Lena.
Lena?
Here we, Lena. That's me. It's here and now. This is the time and the place. I don't know why I'm here. Doesn't matter. The walk's led here, and he sees it.
Somehow, this story about two derelicts whose home and happiness have been bulldozed by the white authorities and have lost their only child, which had been born dead. Somehow, this story about the world in which we live, every day of our lives, about the challenges we face every day of our lives, of how we react to and see the other human beings who inhabit our space on this day of our lives. That's all I could do. Most important thing is I tried to be truthful.
Hey, no!
Help me! Help me! For once a favor, Boesman, my last one. Drew's gone. Hit me now.
Says Lena. We're not people anymore. Hey, Boesman and Lena, shit. Hey, shit! Shit world! All there is to say. That's our word. After that, our life is dumb. Hey, like your belly. All that came out of it was silence. There should have been a noise. You pushed out silence, and the Boesman buried it in the ground. Deep holes. I filled them up. I said it's shit. One day your turn, one day mine. 2 more holes somewhere. The earth will vomit when they push us in. And it's finished. The end of Boesman and Lena.
I try to rescue them from oblivion. Stages where that play is performed are their graves. They are buried, they are named, they live. That is what a writer does. Rescues from oblivion the nameless, the unwanted, the homeless, the destitute. And that is what South Africa needs, because we have had millions. I have been privileged to try and rescue a couple of names, not the actual people. God, listen, rescuing their names would have been nothing like rescuing the people and giving them lives that were worthy of the dignity they deserved. But at least at the very end, if you are a writer of conscience in this country, there's one final rescue you can pull off.
Thank you all so much for coming. The stage part of the evening is over, but we want to invite you all to join us down in the bar in the theatre, where we're all going to raise a glass to Athol. So if you would like to vacate your seats and head down to the bar, we're going to finish tonight's celebration with a glass of Athol's favourite wine. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to everybody who's made a part of this celebration this evening. Thank you.
Abantwana bancane mama oyithina la abantwana bancane mama oyibo labantwana abancane bakaNkulunkulu bo oyibo labantwana abancane abahlala etempeleni mama oyizole izingane zikaNkulunkulu usiyababona abantwana abancane abahlala